because if you're here tonight, you are part of our preferred club program with Coaching Actuaries. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Bethany, and I am the Director of Customer Services Support at Coaching Actuaries, along with University Relations. So I also have the privilege of overseeing our preferred club program. So if you are on this call, you are an ambassador with us, or your school participates in our preferred club program. So our program orchestrates events just like the one that we're doing here tonight. Preferred Club program has been around for nearly a decade, and currently we work with 75 schools. So about 20 schools responded that they were participating. Just to give you an idea of like who's in the room. Just a quick reminder that our goal of Preferred Club is to connect with students and provide comprehensive educational resources related to actuarial science, while also extending exclusive benefits to U.S. club members. So yeah, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules, and we're happy to partner with you in your exam journey. So I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Charles. Just a couple of housekeeping things, getting throughout the next half hour, 45 minutes. Things to remember is feel free to use the chat feature, but for the most part, if you could remain muted unless Charles asks you to participate, just go ahead and be muted. Just keeps everything nice and clean on the audio recording. Also, we will allow time for some questions at the end. So if you have specific questions, feel free to hang tight. And then for the recording, that will be sent out to the club ambassador, and then they can disseminate it to their club members. So just give us a couple days to get that turned around and get that out to club ambassadors, and then they can send it out however they prefer to club members. So yeah, without further ado, I'll pass it over to Charlie then. And yeah, we've been partnering with him for almost a year, and excited to just have these opportunities. He has a wealth of experience and knowledge to bring to the table, and is obviously very deeply passionate about nurturing the next generation of actuaries. So we're excited to be partnering with him and have this opportunity.
Thank you so much for the intro, Bethany. Before we get started, just a couple things. One, thank you to everyone who has their camera on. If you don't have your camera on, I would love to see your face. It helps me as I walk through this, make sure that everyone is following along with what I do. I'm going to drop a link to my LinkedIn in the chat. Please feel free to connect with me if you have follow-up questions or things you want to discuss after this. Everyone can see my screen, right? We're all good? Some thumbs up, some nods. Okay. We're going to dive in. So this presentation is how to succeed in an internship. But it's pretty transferable, I think, to how to succeed in an entry-level job, or just any time you start a new role in the first 3 months. I'm going to direct everything to internships, but I think many of the things I'm going to talk about today are very transferable. So who am I? I'm Charles Johnson. I'm a fellow of the Society of Actuaries. I spent 10 years as a life actuary. I ran actuarial recruitment programs when I was at State Farm. I ran the internship program when I was at Northwestern Mutual. So I've been hiring, training actuaries for the last 10 years, and I run a company called the Actuarial Development Institute that runs leadership development and soft skill development programs for actuaries, recruitment fairs, conferences, and then we help with career coaching for actuaries early in their career to navigate promotions, job changes, and things like that. So that's my background, and we're going to dive right in. The first thing I want to do before we start is just dispelling myths. I talk to students all the time, and they often come with these preconceived notions about actuarial internships and the expectations on themselves. And the first one that I want to just knock out is what you're expected to know is very little. You could have a good background, attend your actuarial club meetings, know a lot about the actuarial industry as a whole. You could pass a bunch of exams, but when you actually start an internship, generally your projects are so specific, both from what your coding language or software you might be using, or what specific product line or what specific role within a company, that you're basically going to have very little baseline knowledge. I mean, if you understand fundamental actuarial mathematics and maybe some broad product knowledge, that's a good background. But the specific work you're going to do is generally going to be something you're going to have to learn when you get there. So I have this question all the time, and we will talk about ways you could prepare before you start an internship. But just know that we know that it's going to be a pretty steep learning curve for you when you get on the job. The second one is, I think there's, especially from the corporate side, sometimes there's this like notion that interns are this really great value because they're cheaper from an hourly perspective than full-time people. Interns are expensive, just like period. You consume time from managers who are trained and competent actuaries. The training takes a really long time. And you just don't work that much. You work like 11 to 12 weeks, which is actually like a really short period of time. You're legally not allowed to work more than 40 hours a week. So like the expectations for who you are and what you're going to do are kind of reasonable, I would say, around what you can do in an internship. So the ways that you stand out and excel are really like small because of the window that you have to perform. So you're not going to do anything like life-changing for the company or for yourself. So the key is in the small window with this limited expectations, how do you differentiate yourself from your peers and deliver a lot of value for the company? Does this make sense? If anyone on this call like has had an internship, just like nod hard when it's like, yeah, that thing is definitely it. So before we continue though, I just want to like caveat. If anyone knows anything about the actuarial standards of practice, like anytime you send an actuarial communication, rule number one is like, what is the purpose, the scope, and the limitation? So I'm doing my actuarial due diligence here. Every internship and job is different. I'm going to give you advice. I'm going to try to look at it from like a 10,000 point view. It is not a prescription for how to do well in an internship. Each job is different. Each company is different. And the expectations on each role will be different. Hiring decisions also vary a lot. So companies sometimes hire a group of interns with an intent to convert every single one of them. Some companies hire interns with the knowledge that they have no full-time positions available. So hiring decisions have a very wide set of criteria in terms of demand and budget and all that. So again, I'm going to give you advice for how to perform well, but it's not if I do this, I will definitely get a job offer, prescription. The best thing you could do is have conversations with your boss and hiring manager. They're going to know the information. I'll talk about when and what to ask them later in this. But again, I'm just one person. The best source of information are the people that make decisions for you. Okay. I'll also caveat here that many bosses are first-time managers, so they also need some grace too. Your goal is to get clarity and expectations as early as possible from them. Okay. This is all boilerplate stuff. I'm sure everyone's like, yeah, we know this. We're not idiots, right? Everyone's with me. Okay. So I just want to tell you about my first internship. I think it will be useful to reference as we go back through this. So my first internship, I interned at Pacific Life Insurance out in California. I built a program in MATLAB. I was the only one that was writing code in MATLAB. All right. And this is actually not uncommon in internships. Sometimes you get to an internship and they're like, we have this cool idea about a software language. And you're like, great, who's going to train me? And they're like, we don't really have anyone. We're hoping that you can figure it out and then figure out how to use it on the job. And so that was my internship. I built a competitive pricing tool. And then at the end of the summer, I got to present to the CEO. And this is also something that's generally pretty consistent across internships, is that at the end of it, you're going to have an opportunity to present your work to high-level decision makers within the company. And so I'm going to talk about some of the experiences I had and where there are common threads in order to perform well as an intern. All right. So this is the structure of this is like, one, I'm going to talk about what the keys to success are and then how to unlock those keys to success. So the first one is work quality. Like I cannot hammer this home enough, but you could be the nicest person and everyone could like you. But at the end of the day, the quality of your work is the most important thing. All right. And I'm going to dive for why is quality of work and what does it mean to produce high quality work, which varies again, depending on the situation. So understanding that's really important. But if there's one thing that you do well, it's deliver high quality work on the job. Again, short period of time, very limited amount of work you're going to produce. So making sure that the quality of that work is really good is key to success. The second one is work improvement. Don't just do the work well, but figure out how to do the work better. All right. And I'm going to talk about all the different ways that you can improve work beyond just completing it well. And then the last one is communication and culture. How do you communicate amongst your peers? What is the culture of the organization that you're in? Okay. And then how do you interact with those two? So let's talk about work quality. Doing things correctly. This is, I was amazed at, there's two things here. First, in college, there's this, you can get 10% off and still get an A, right? That's common in the collegiate world. But if you're producing like sophisticated, complicated calculations or analytics, 10% wrong is 100% wrong, right? So one of the key things that you need to do when you start internships, particularly in actuarial, is learn how to validate your work, right? So if you're assigned a project, one of the first questions for your manager is, how do I check to make sure that the results I'm getting are accurate? How do I validate that what I'm producing is correct? Because if you consistently go back to your manager and your work is wrong, which it inevitably will be, you are going to make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. The question is, how do I catch it first and make sure that before it gets seen by anyone else, I validate that what I've got is correct? The second thing, where's my mouse? Okay, here we go. You want clarity of the results and the product that you produce. So you're like pretty much anything you do is for other people at work. Okay. The clarity and obviousness of what you're producing, the results that you're creating is really important. So if you're I built a pricing tool. I knew how that pricing tool worked. I wrote literally every line of code that produces that tool, but someone else who did not write that code is going to have to pick up my product and understand how to use it. Someone who has never written in MATLAB is going to have to be able to troubleshoot when that program doesn't work. So I have to think as I'm building out this software, as I'm designing a product, as I'm running data analytics, who is this going to be used for, and how do I make it incredibly clear and obvious what the results are and how to replicate and use them? And the other one is the ease of takeover, right? So someone's going to take over my work, right? And again, sometimes the projects that we're given in that 11 or 12 week span turn out to be a bigger job than they anticipated. Scoping work is hard. It's not like they know every single specific detail and challenge you're going to run into. They know what needs to happen and where we're at, and they need you to work through as much as possible. So making it easy for someone to take over where you've left off is part of high quality work. Okay. You also need to improve the work. So there's a couple key ways to improve. I would say right now, a big one that you can do is automation. Anything that involves the transformation of data, the sending of information, the calculations that are being done, any way that you can automate processes to make them quicker is gonna be improved. So not only did I get the results, but part of the process I automated so that it's faster going forward. Document or simplify. So this is also really interesting. In the actuarial world, when you're building new tools, especially when you're building something from scratch, you tend to build things in specific chunks. So you'll build one part of maybe the base calculation if you're pricing a product, and then you'll build on a feature that adds on to that, and then maybe another feature, and there's this rider, and then there's a second issue series that came on, so we need to have like special caveats in there. And what happens is the tools become increasingly complicated and hard to use. So this actually happens all the time in the real actual world. You'll pick up a tool that someone else built, and it takes a long time to figure out how to use it and how the calculations in the background work. Any way that you can document something that you pick up that wasn't clear to you, or you can figure out calculations or processes that can be simplified in steps, like reduce the number of steps or reduce the calculations so that, again, it's easier or clearer for people after you. And then improve results. And we'll talk a little bit about how to identify what better results are. But if you can deliver a product that's better than it was before, that's another way to improve the work overall. When I was working in mortgage, we had so many Frankenstein tools. Yeah, no, it's the actuarial world is rife with old stuff that just is really hard for us to get off of. So the opportunities for technological improvement, bringing in new systems, new software, new coding is huge. And especially as so many of you guys are coming out of college with R and Python skills, you're going to be leagues ahead of most of your colleagues that don't know, that they've never even touched those languages. All right. So a huge opportunity for you to bring in your unique skill set and expertise. Communication culture. So this is the last one. And again, we'll talk about like some more how to do some of this. But one is your relationship to your peer group. I know sometimes people think about, I'm competing against my fellow interns for, a limited number of positions, but I would challenge you to think that like we're evaluating how you interact and how you're viewed by your peers. Are you a leader? Are you someone that people get along with? I mean, we've legitimately not chosen to give people full-time offers because the intern group says that we did not get along with them well. They did not make us feel included. They said things to us in private outside of work that we didn't feel comfortable with, right? So having good relationships with your peers and your intern group is really important. It demonstrates the kind of character that you have. Take advantage of presentation opportunities and value them really highly. Okay. One of the great lines from Christine Hofbeck, who wrote a book I'll recommend later, is it's not about who you know, it's about who knows you. And when you're presenting and standing in front of groups, that small snapshot can be a huge defining moment for how people view and value the work that you've done. And we'll talk a little bit about presentations later. And then just think about when you're being seen by decision makers. So understand who the decision makers are, who's the hiring manager, who's the chief actuary or principal consultant, and when are you going to be seen by them, and how are you going to make an impression? And again, we'll talk about some of that as well. All right. We're just going to pause here. We're 23, like 18 minutes in, we're like halfway through. We're riding. Everyone's still with me. I haven't bored anyone to sleep yet, or at least everyone asleep has turned their camera off because you guys are all very smart people. We're all good. Someone give me a thumbs up. Boom. I love it. Okay. So let's talk about how. How do we do this? So the first one, I talked about this, but it's got to be understand your expectations. Every boss is different. Every job is different. Like you have to reach out to your boss as far ahead of time as possible and understand what the expectations for performance are for you on this job. Sometimes it's going to be like, can you do work as quickly as possible? Sometimes it's going to be, can you do work as well as possible? But getting clarity and expectations as early on as possible is going to be key to success. The second one is understanding the context of your work. And I'm going to dive into each one of these three a little more in a minute. And the last one is how do you make lasting impressions? I'm going to talk about all three of these. So understanding your expectations is what can you learn before your internship? Like I said, we're going to expect that what you're going to do during your internship is so obscenely specific, you'll have no background information. However, if you know who your boss is and he knows what your project is, and you're like, hey, boss, what am I going to be working on this summer? And he's like, well, we're going to code a MATLAB project. And I was like, great, I've never coded in MATLAB. Maybe I could do some training for that before I get on the job. That's going to allow me to be more successful. Again, remember, you only have like 11 or 12 weeks. So if you can take 1 or 2 days of less training or a week of less training, that is a significant like 10 to 20% additional work time that you're going to get to perform on the job. And again, very small window, very small opportunity. So anything that you can do to add additional value or product quality is going to contribute to the value that you're seen as on your internship. The second one is having discussions about quality versus speed, right? So I think a lot of us have this natural inclination of like, oh, I want to be a straight A student. I want to produce the highest quality work, or, I want to get as much done as I possibly can. Having that conversation with your boss about like, what is this work going to be used for? And if I got it done in 2 weeks versus 4 weeks, but it looked really good, which one would be more valuable to you? Right. And it's going to vary by situation, context, job. Sometimes in consulting work, it's like, let's just get it out as quick as possible. Or sometimes it's like, no, this is a giant client and, the quality is really important. Sometimes we're pricing a product that's going to be sold for the next 10 years. Right. So then like take as much time as you possibly can to make sure it's as good as possible. So understanding quality versus speed is going to be really important. And the last one, and I actually have a whole separate slide on this because it's such a common challenge that I find interns have in their internships, and that's independent work versus learning. Okay, so I have a whole slide specifically on this. So at the beginning of an internship, like how many people here have interviewed for a job or like started their internship and everyone was like, ask questions, like questions are so good, right? We're just like, heaped praise on for the questions that we ask in our inquisition. And it is really important. At the beginning of the internship, you don't know anything. And the way to gather that knowledge is asking questions. However, what you want to do as early and as quickly as possible is move from asking questions from people to identifying resources to self-educate yourself, right? You're not the first person to have questions. You're not the first person to need to learn stuff about the products, the work, the tools. Figure out where the resources are that you can start answering questions yourself and build that list. And what you want to do over time is start condensing your questions to only once or twice a week, right? You remember how I talked about that value add? Part of your value add is how much time are you consuming from your boss? And I've actually seen this in internships where people are like rewarded continuously for the questions they ask. And they're almost using the fact they have questions as an excuse for why they're not progressing in their work. And I consistently see that the best interns are the ones that, especially after a couple of weeks of being on the job, are the ones that are spending an extra amount of time trying to self-educate themselves and teach themselves and deal with their own problems. All right. Now, don't, again, use the fact that you're trying to self-educate yourself as an excuse for why you're not making progress, but understand that there's a balance there, right? Figuring out how to teach yourself and then dealing with issues, problems, and knowledge on your own is the way that you demonstrate success, because that's what you need in the long term to be successful, is the ability to answer your own questions and solve problems on your own. If you guys don't remember anything from this whole presentation, this is the one slide that I think is the most important. Everyone with me still? Cool. All right. This is the fun one for me. I'm a big enterprise guy. I like the big picture. So understand context, okay? So like anytime that you go to start like an internship or a job, there is like a laundry list of stuff that needs to get done, right? It's not like, a company's like, oh, we have a cool project idea, let's hire an intern. It's like, no, we have like 1,000 project ideas. We have a million little things that an intern can do. And they pick that specific one. Why? Right? Sit down with your boss. Why is, of all the things that are being done, why is this thing a priority right now? Okay. And then understand who is it for and what are they going to do with it? Understanding the context for who's going to use it. Remember how before I said like getting better results? This is how you get better results, is you understand what the intent of the thing you're building or the work that you're doing is, right? Like, oh, I added all these extra, results on. Like, well, we don't need those extra results. Like, what good is that? But, oh, we're trying to make a decision about competitive pricing. Oh, well, here's some more interesting competitive information, that might be useful in making that decision, right? If you can understand who the end user is, you can improve the quality of your output because you know what it's going to be used for. And then understand how it impacts the company or the business, right? And it's not so much that this is going to make you deliver a better product, but it's going to help you understand the business and what you're working on. Part of your goal here is to have a deeper and better understanding of your companies, the products, the services you provide, and understanding that your small chunk of work fits into a much larger puzzle is going to give you a more complete picture of that puzzle. And it's going to help you going forward when you go to like presentations or when you're talking. And again, we'll talk a little bit about your final presentations in a minute, but understanding the context and impact to the business as a whole is going to make you look way more intelligent and competent because you understand the bigger picture. We're crushing it on time. I think we might hit 30 minutes. Either that or there's going to be a million questions at the end I can't answer. We'll find out soon. Okay, how do we make lasting impressions? So here's one that people actually struggle with a lot, and that's just like taking compliments. Like I know that being humble is great, and I encourage everyone to be humble hard workers. As an intern, when you're complimented on your work and you downplay the work you did, like, oh, I just followed the directions, like I didn't even do anything. Like, don't do that. Like say, I enjoyed working on it. Thank you for recognizing it. Don't brag like, oh yeah, I'm awesome. It was super hard. But take compliments in stride. Like, yes, that is something. Anytime someone work, just say thank you and say that you enjoyed it. Talk about how much you love the work that you're doing, how much you enjoy being there. That excitement attached to high quality work product is that's what people will remember. Like, oh, not only did they do good work, but they enjoy it. Right. So learn how to take compliments at work. It's really important to your self-image. The next one is when you meet with leaders and relevant decision makers, have thoughtful and relevant questions. So I'll give you an example. If you work in life insurance and you're going to go talk to a pricing manager, ask them how they're dealing with interest rates, right? Like that's a very relevant top of the mind. Things are changing right now. If you know something specific about the background of a leader, ask questions about their background or their career tracks. While generic questions are like, why did you work here? Or what's great about this company? Like they're fine. But when you understand the background and context of what people are working on, it demonstrates the knowledge that you have and the care and interest that you have in that company. So what questions you ask when you meet with leaders and being thoughtful and relevant about them, again, helps you stand out from your peers in terms of like, oh, I'm thoughtful, I plan ahead, and I'm going to utilize your valuable time effectively to actually improve my life and my quality of work. And then the final presentation is key. And this is just like a snapshot I've seen, I can't tell you how many times, as a make or break to whether people get job offers, the quality of their final presentation. So let's dive into this a little bit. How do you do a kick-ass final presentation? Excuse my language. So this is actually counterintuitive, but like giving background. So again, you think that everyone knows so much because like when you get there, you know so little. But it's amazing how in 11 or 12 weeks, because you're in the super specific program, the super specific product, the super specific project, you actually know a bunch of stuff that other people don't know. So when you're giving your final presentation, assume that everyone is about as dumb as you were at the end of week one and give some baseline background to what's going on. The second thing is you want to communicate things simplistically and clearly. Using fancy jargon and abbreviations and trying to sound smart is the antithesis of sounding smart. The most intelligent and competent people, actually pay attention to this sometime. You go listen to an executive talk, most executives talk in clear and simple language because competency and understanding comes from clarity of communication. All right. So, and it's hard, right? One of my favorite quotes is, and it's attributed to a million authors, but I would have written a longer letter, but I didn't, or I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have time. Making things dense and simple and short and condensed is a difficult activity to do. All right. But that's really what you want to do when it comes to your final presentation. You also want visuals and examples. So remember, I built this pricing tool. So what happened was PackLife had this weird thing where the people who sold products could change features in it, and it would change the premium and commission rate, which was kind of like a unique, weird thing. So in my pricing tool, I had to do this special interpolation to compare how our pricing worked against all these other competitors to make sure that our commissions were fair for evenly priced premiums. And so when I was talking about it, I said, and this is another good key. I hear this people like, oh, I don't want to steal someone else's presentation. Like it's not college, you're not plagiarizing. If someone else has an example or a cool visual that you're like, oh, that would be so relevant for me, just be like, hey, can I use that in my presentation? Another great quote is like, don't reinvent the wheel, just spin it faster, right? So take the useful things that other people have built so that you can deliver high quality communication. Reusing stuff, great idea. Do that in the work world. I mean, obviously ask permission, but do that when you can. So I had this director talking about cake cutting. He's like, oh, well, the premium's a cake and you cut it up with, expenses and benefits and commission. And as he was giving this presentation, I was like, oh man, when I talk about my tool, that's a great example for it. And I loved that visual. So I went and I was like, hey, in my final presentation, can I use your cake cutting slides about describing the background for premium products? And he was like, yeah. So in my presentation, I was like, we're comparing our cake cutting to other cake cutting companies. And it's dumb, but that little visual and humor lasts, right? And just like small bits of humor make a really lasting impression. Another one, it was a stupid, cheesy joke at the beginning, but I was like, oh, I remember starting here and I said something about like how actuaries are so easy to understand when you talk to them the first time. And just everyone died laughing. I didn't even think it was a good joke. Everyone started laughing. And again, it's that small bits of humor that relate confidence and competence. It lets people know I know what I'm doing up here and I know what I'm talking about. So if you can inject a little humor, you have good background so everyone's on the same page, you have good visuals and clarity, you have a simplistic, here is my finding, here are the results. That is going to deliver high competency sounding presentations. All right. Everyone with me? We're going to review real quick. So the keys to success: produce high quality work. That's by and far the most important thing you can do. While you deliver quality work, see if you can improve the process somehow to make it easier, better, faster. And then be a good communicator and mesh well with the culture. Be someone who fits in, be someone who contributes value and makes people feel welcome at home. And that when you have an opportunity to present or get in front of decision makers and important people, you deliver something that lasts and has a lasting impression that's positive about you. And how do you do that? You understand the expectations that are set on you. You understand the context of the work you're doing. You make lasting impressions. And as a bonus, because this is way shorter than I thought it was. This is great. Everyone, right? Everyone's like, no, we wanted an hour and a half presentation. No one ever wants that. Here's some great books to read. So when I ran my internship program, we all read Winning Conditions by Christine Hofbeck. Christine Hofbeck's an actuary. It's a great book just about how to set yourself up for success, and it's particularly appropriate for entering the corporate world. Another one is How to Measure Anything by Douglas Hubbard. It just talks about like how you actually think about metrics of success in your life. And then the last one, and I recommend this every single time, but it's a book, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. He's a Nobel Prize winning behavioral economist, and he describes some of the most foundational and important behavioral economics that's used in insurance. So, Winning Conditions, great corporate one. But the rest are just good background on how to measure success and some good background for the insurance world. And with that, I think we have lots of time for questions, and I will do my absolute best to give you good answers. Or I literally delivered the greatest presentation in history and everyone knows everything they need to know, in which case, simplicity and clarity, right? Where is that slide? Boom. I didn't have any good visuals though. I apologize. Next time I do this, I'm gonna have much better visuals and examples. I'll stop sharing.
I think we could also ask if there are no questions, if anyone has had any experiences that they would like to share that could benefit this group, we'd also be open to hearing that too.
Sorry, I want to ask a question real quick, actually. So when you're looking for internships and full-time positions, I feel like a lot of the actuarial listings on Indeed or whatever website, they all look really similar in terms of like qualifications and what they claim. Do you have any tips on like how to tell the differences between like a really synergistic program or something?
Okay, hold on. I have to figure out what the question that was asked right there. So you're asking if based on a job description, you can tell
No, just
how
like
synergistic. I'm sorry, the
not even,
synergistic
but just
threw
like
me
a
off.
good like work environment slash a good like, position or anything, like just any key signs for your experience with both listing and applying.
From a job listing, it's probably going to be hard. I think the interview process is really where you identify the culture. And I think there's a couple key questions you can ask, like, why do you stay at this company? Or even better, I like going right for data. Like, what's the average? How long on average do people stay here? During your busy time, what's your average number of hours you work each week? Just kind of telltale signs like that can indicate whether it's a healthy work environment or not. Another one is like, how do you measure personal growth and performance goals, and what are the expectations set on you? So diving into some of those more specific data and culture questions, because if you ask anyone, do you like working here? No one in the interview process is like, it's the worst, but from a job listing itself, no, they're I wouldn't say intentionally generic, but they're generic just because of the expectation. Like one, an intern group generally can work on a pretty wide variety of projects. So like saying, oh, you're going to be doing data studies or you're going to help with reserving, right? You might hire 6 kids and they all do a bunch of different stuff. But the other one is that like, again, we know generically that there's not necessarily going to be relevant experience that you have that's going to apply specifically. It's more like, hey, are you taking exams? Do you have, some coding experience? Do you have any applied, relevant experience that might be transferable? So they tend to just be more generic in the entry level. Now, however, you get like 4 years in and it's the opposite. It's like hyper specific. Like we want you to have this product experience and this, reserving role. And so that changes very quickly once you get to the professional side. Does that answer your question, Casey?
Yeah, that's a great note. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Elizabeth with the hand raise.
I was just wondering if you would recommend studying for an exam while you're doing an internship, because I know usually summertime previously has been a nice span of time for me to lock in on some studying without like schoolwork, but I don't know if that would take away from the internship.
It's an interesting question. So I'm kind of thinking out loud here because it's not necessarily like obviously you should or obviously you shouldn't. I passed an exam while I had my internship. It probably made me look good. I don't know for sure. The hiring manager didn't, but like, we are giving you an offer because of that exam you passed. But she did say you have like after my by the way, in case anyone's wondering, I gave that final presentation, the one that was funny, and the CEO was in that room, and the HR manager came up to me afterward, was like, "You have a permanent, outstanding job offer. You can come work here anytime." So you like really that lasting impressions on decision makers can make a big difference. I would say that like it's really up to you. Demonstrating that you can study and that you can work and pass an exam is good. I would say though, that's probably not going to factor into whether you get a job offer. Like I don't think I'm trying to think of examples or times. Generally, we know by the time you've gotten to an internship that you probably can pass exams, or you'll demonstrate that between the time we hire you. So it's not like we expect anyone to take exams over the summer. So I would say it's more preference. If you want to, you can, and it probably does make you look good. But I wouldn't say that tends to be one of the key decision-making factors on giving offers. Is that helpful, Elizabeth? Okay, cool. It's a good
Yes,
question.
thank you.
That's a good question. Yes, Catherine.
So I know that this was geared mainly towards summer internships, but is there anything that you have to add about possibly like year-long part-time during the school year internships that might be different?
That's different. You're definitely going to have a lot more opportunities for projects there. So understanding that speed versus quality is going to become increasingly important. Like, are you producing work at a regular interval that's in line with expectations of your manager? Over the summer, if you do 1 or 2 projects, right, it's not like, oh, look at how much work they can do, or, it's more just like, can you do the work? Can you do it well? Over school year ones where you have longer time spans, it's going to be a lot more about work consistency. So not that you just do a good project, but how consistent is your work over that period of time? So again, expectations and manager feedback are important. And that you're also going to get opportunities to get feedback and improve. It's really hard to do over an internship, to get feedback and then improve over a very short period of time. But as you have longer periods of time, that's going to become increasingly important to your long-term performance and conversion. Another great question. Thank you, Catherine. Other questions? Yes, Ian.
I wanted to build off of Elizabeth's question. So what necessarily happens if a intern passes an exam either before they get an internship, say they get an offer, and then they pass an exam, or they pass an exam during their internship? Because I know a lot of an actuarial's pay tends to be based off of exam passes. But is that something that an intern should even have an expectation of, or how does that work for interns since they are there for such a short amount of time?
Yeah, interns generally, I'm trying to think of an example where it's not true. And I can't think of one off the top of my head, but almost all internships you get an hourly raise per exam passed. I guess I can think of one company that like caps it at 2. So if you pass like 5 exams, they won't give you, a raise for every single one. But the general consensus is that as you pass an exam, your hourly wage goes up. So even if you like get an offer and you accept it, if you pass an exam between the acceptance date and the start date, your rate goes up. I think mine even went up during my internship when I passed that exam in the middle. I'm old, I can't remember that far back. Great question, Ian. Is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, that's perfect. A follow-up question to that. What do you do? Do you go to like your manager, or do you just or do you send an email like, "Hey, I passed this," or something like that?
That should work.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Other questions?
I actually just had a comment because I did have an internship over the summer, and so I was kind of laughing at some of the because it was so relatable what you were talking about in terms of like understanding context, like who the project is for, what it's going to be used for. I think when I started with my manager, it was kind of his first um, summer having like an intern, and so we kind of really just jumped right into the weeds of the project. And kind of when I was getting toward the end of the project and having to present it soon to like some of the um, like chief people in the company, some of the executive leadership, I was trying to think of like um, basically trying to formulate the how I was going to explain what the project was and what it was useful for. I was having a really hard time, and in hindsight, if I had kind of stepped back and asked him earlier what the project was going to be used for, who it was for, why we were doing it, that definitely would have helped clear a lot of things up.
I love this because I'm going to riff on this for 1 second. People are often surprised at how, I don't want to say the word disorganized, but that's what comes to mind. Like how not clear it is when you start an internship. People are like, oh, actuaries, I'm going to start my internship and I know exactly what I'm going to do. But it's not like that. You're going to get hired. Someone that's only been out of school, usually maybe like 3 years, is going to be your manager. That's probably the first time they've ever managed anyone. And they don't actually know that much about the project you're going to be working on anyway. So they're kind of figuring it out while you do. So often by the end of the summer, you know more than they do about the respective project that you're on. So it's not always this like clear, hey, here's what I'm supposed to be doing. They know exactly what it is. Here's my expectations, and we'll just measure my performance out of out of 100 at the end. It's much more, tends to be a lot more ambiguous and collaborative than like a dictatorship where they're like, this is what, like when I was doing my project and I was the only one coding, me and my boss were just troubleshooting stuff sometimes. I was like, I can't figure this out. I've tried for a whole bunch. And so we're just sitting there trying to figure out, how to do this specific thing within MATLAB. Other questions? Thanks, Kyle. Or comments. Want to speak their story. I think that's a sufficiently long pause, Bethany. I don't know. I think there's some rule for it. Oh, go ahead, Angelina. Sorry.
So this summer, my manager was a first-time manager as well. And one thing I did at the very beginning before we even got to know each other was just to like open up the conversation with her and to allow for improvements on both sides because it was kind of like the first time for both of us. And I actually got my interim discussion notes from my closet from this summer. And one thing like she also said to me was to have a deeper understanding of the stuff I was going on because I was kind of just doing the task. So it, like what you were saying about like fully understanding the why helped me too.
I love that. Clearly a great first-time manager. All right, we got a chat question or comment. Okay, I'm feeling nervous about navigating a business environment. Yeah, no, corporate environment is kind of intimidating. I'm not gonna lie. I smoked cigarettes for like several years in college, not a proud moment, but someone gave me a speech about, they were like, they ran a company And just for like 5 minutes in the speech, they were like, I hate people that smoke cigarettes. They stink. I get complaints all the time. My health insurance goes up. So I legitimately just quit smoking cigarettes because I was terrified of entering my first corporate job and like people hating me because of that. So great, best health decision of my life. Will a manager be the main person to ask about most of the things you mentioned? Yeah, generally your manager is going to be your go-to person. Again, every company and internship, they're going to be structured different. Sometimes, you'll have like an intern. So I was like an intern coordinator, where I coordinated the program, and an intern manager. And sometimes there's a hiring manager that's different. But for the most part, especially when it comes to like questions and work expectations, your direct manager is going to be the person you go to. They, at the end of the day, are going to have the biggest say in whether you get a job offer or not. So having a good relationship for them, knowing what they expect out of you, and then getting good, consistent feedback throughout the internship is key. But the corporate world's actually really nice. They're all just nice people. They're just trying to get by. It's not that scary. Side note, so I ran this program for like high school students that came from like disenfranchised areas when we were at State Farm. And the number one thing the students said when they got there was like week 2, they were like, we didn't think everyone would be so nice. We thought they'd all be so stuck up. They work in the biggest building in town. And like, no, there's a bunch of, Joe Schmoes that are trying to get by. Plus insurance is like a nice space. We have all regular, consistent jobs. Maybe consulting's a little different, but insurance is generally a pretty good culture. I saw Angelina nod. Kyle nodded on that too. It's pretty nice. Any other questions or fun comments?
I just kind of want to add one more thing about like humor, which is something you talked about. So we kind of had a presentation somewhere, all the actuaries at the company came together, and I got to kind of see some of the presentations, what they're doing in different business units. And the most memorable presentation was someone was giving a presentation about like John Deere tractors. And like he started the presentation, he was looking around at the podium, and he like pulls out a toy tractor, puts a John Deere hat on, and like there was some problem with these John Deere tractors starting on fire. And so he had like fire transitions in the slides and whatever. And like it was hilarious and it was memorable, and it I think made an impression on a lot of people. So like it's just keeping it kind of light. A lot of actuaries have a good sense of humor, so that really helps make an impression.
And a job that lacks a lot of laughter, humor is a great and a much needed relief. I love that. I will add much funnier transitions next time, Kyle. You've inspired me. Any other questions? We're almost dead on the 1 hour mark. This is so incredibly impressive. Does someone have a 6-minute question answer that I can give? So no, I'm just kidding.
Oh, I have a question. So I've heard from people that a reason why not as many companies want to hire me is because I haven't actually graduated yet, as I'm graduating in March. And so I decided to just apply for an actual job, and not many have responded. I just want to make sure that I'm just like, I don't know why so many don't interview. Like I had plenty of interviews for internships, but not as much for entry level jobs. Is it because I haven't graduated yet? Or are they scared that I won't graduate?
No, generally internships and full-time jobs for actual positions are hired like early September through end of October, early November. Though I would say there's a lot of insurance and consulting companies that wait until budget time to decide how many entry-level positions. So I would say in the last month, there's probably been a bunch of additional entry-level jobs. But no, almost no companies I know wait to hire entry-level people until after they've graduated. That should not be a factor in hiring. Does that answer your question, Sheer?
Oh, yeah.
Excellent. Catherine, you were going to ask something.
Yeah, it wasn't a question actually. It was something that I think Angelina was the one that said it, but when she was talking about her internship and her manager also being new, just like something that kind of stuck out was like, asking your manager how they like to give and receive feedback, especially if they're newer in their role, just seems like a really good practice. That way you guys can get on the same page and you know how they want to receive feedback as well, not just give it to you.
Yeah, and managers are not always good at giving feedback either. So like, hey, I need feedback. Can we talk about how I've been doing after the first, 4 or 6 weeks? It's a good thing to bring up in your one-on-ones. Anyone else? We good? Bethany, are we good?
I think so. Yep, we're all good here.
Well, it was nice seeing some familiar faces. And for all the new faces, it was nice seeing you too. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. If you guys ever want to chat or have additional questions, you can reach out to me anytime. And thank you so much, Bethany, and Coaching Actuaries for being the best support system for actuaries wanting to pass exams.
Oh no, you guys are all welcome. It's our pleasure, and we're happy to be able to be along for the ride and the ups and downs. And it's really like the core of like everyone at Coaching Actuaries just loves what we do. So just wish you guys all well in your journeys and studies. All right, have a good night.